It's a little dark right now because it's stormy, but stormy. It's stormy though, so it's dark outside. So yes, hello and welcome back to my channel. I wasn't expecting to do this video so soon. I thought that I wasn't going to read enough, but yeah, I've been reading a lot, and I read about 6 or 7 books by the time that I'm doing this video. So I decided to just talk about what I've been reading again. Last video I talked about the ACOTAR series, and I had read A Court of Frost and Starlight, and then I just didn't talk about it. I completely forgot about it. So I'm gonna talk about it now. And do I have my notes still? Let's see. I don't know if there's really much to say about it, but I do want to just talk about it just so that I hate that I skipped over it. I wish I would have talked about it last video. So A Court of Frost and Starlight, it's a novella. Basically, it takes place between almost directly after A Court of Wings and Ruin, and then A Court of Silver Flames comes directly after that. Am I sweating? You might see my sweat stains. It's a little warm. Yeah, so Court of Frost and Starlight, it's a novella. Feyre, Rhysand, and their friends are still busy rebuilding the Night Court and the vastly altered world beyond recovering from the war that changed everything. Did it change everything though? But one of the things that I was thinking of the other day is that because I'm listening to Crescent City on audiobook, so I was thinking about ACOTAR, the series, and I was like, so it seems like, if you don't know, spoiler, but it seems like, well, I've already talked about it, actually. But Sarah J. Maas, her series, each different series that she has written, they're a part of the same, it's like a multiverse, but they're a part of the same world, her world, Sarah J. Maas's world. It seems like it's leading to something bigger. And so an argument could be made that the ACOTAR trilogy, the conflicts that the characters face, maybe that wasn't supposed to be their biggest challenge. But the thing is, it's if this is your series, if this is a series, then it should have, each book in a series should have its own story, and then the story as a whole should have something eventful enough to make it impactful as a series, if that makes sense. The conflict in the trilogy, the ACOTAR trilogy, it just doesn't feel not even just there's not a lot of stakes, but it just doesn't feel like with Amarantha and then with the King of Hybern, they're just not challenging enough. I think so, personally. And then when you get to the final war, the resolution in the end of ACOWAR is that Fae and humans and stuff, they're gonna try and work together. And honestly, I don't even remember that meeting very well. It was all the High Lords, Feyre, and all of them, and they're in her old house in the human world, I guess, and they're just trying to find out a way to live together in harmony, I guess. I don't know, I can't remember. But then, so when you go to Court of Frost and Starlight, they're busy rebuilding their world. War doesn't make sense most of the time anyway, but this war in particular, it was just like I said last video, it kind of just came and went, and then I don't know how much changed from it. Most wars are bad for bad reasons. A lot of wars, especially in the past, you would get a resolution, you get a treaty. I think they redid the treaty. There's a treaty between the human world and the fairy world. I think they redid some sort of treaty, or they're talking about redoing the treaty. I honestly cannot remember. Somebody can refresh my memory. You have an outcome and a resolution at the end of war. I don't really know what sort of meaningful outcome, I guess, came after A Court of Wings and Ruin. And then so you have people trying to rebuild their lives, as this synopsis says. In the synopsis, when it says a vastly altered world, I don't know if it's vastly altered. I don't know how much changed. A lot of things are still very same. They're very they're the same. So it's winter solstice for the Night Court and the Inner Circle, and so they have a hard-earned reprieve, even with the festive atmosphere They can't keep the shadows of the past from looming because everybody in the series has trauma. And as Feyre navigates her first winter solstice as High Lady, her concern for those dearest to her deepens. They have more wounds than she anticipated, scars that will have a far-reaching impact on the future of their court, bridging the events of Court of Wings and Ruin with the later books in the series. A Court of Frost and Starlight explores the far-reaching effects of a devastating war and the fierce love between friends. Rhys is talking to Cassian in the beginning of the book, and no, in the beginning of the book, Feyre is like, we haven't had time together since she has like all these High Lady duties, which is a whole thing unto itself. Like, her being High Lady makes zero sense. Well, as a political move, I will say, kind of makes sense. It's like a power move. But she literally, like, administrative wise, I don't know what she does. Like, she just learned to read like a couple of years ago, and now she's in charge of a country. So yeah, I don't really know what she does, but she and Rhysand have not had a lot of time together, sexy times together. I'm like, y'all have been married for like a year, maybe? And you're already having like this problem. That kind of like flirty sort of butterflies in your stomach relationship that they had. I liked that they had that dynamic in A Court of Mist and Fury, and I liked that. So they kind of have like this push and pull friction. By A Court of Frost and Starlight, they're like one person. I've seen things where people have said that Feyre's friends are all Rhysand's friends. Like, she doesn't really have much of anything that's her own thing. She just doesn't seem to have much of an identity outside of Rhysand. Also, so Cassian, I think he was trying to give her like a gift, and Cassian and Nesta, this is before A Court of Silver Flames, but they've been having this tension. So in this novella, things are still developing between the two of them, and Cassian like gets her a gift or something. Like, Nesta shows up to their winter solstice activity, and she like has a tantrum or whatever, and she leaves, and Cassian like pursues her. Honestly, like, he should have just left her alone. Sometimes you just need to leave people alone. He was like just being really pushy, and I didn't really, didn't love that. There's so many times like with Nesta where I'm just like, leave that girl alone. She's had a really hard time. She's the only person for some reason that seems to care that her dad died. Because I didn't care either. Why she's such a bitch and stuff. Like, her dad died. Is she supposed to just be fine after only a year? I don't know. In Frost and Starlight, there is a scene where Rhysand goes to Tamlin. I would read it for you right now. I can't like quote it. So much dogpiling on Tamlin as a character, and I just feel so bad for him. Like, he's obviously not he's done some bad things. Oh man, it's a lot. It's like, he also has trauma, right? He's been through a lot. His family has been killed. His fiance left him. His best friend left him. His court is in ruins. They just left him like that. At the end of the series, like, he does some good things. He helps Feyre, Azriel, and Elaine escape because Elaine was captured. Azriel and Feyre went to go and save her, and so Tamlin helped them escape. He also helped them, he allied with them in the war, and he also helped Rhysand come back to life after he was killed for some reason. But he's like regressed again. I don't know why. I don't know why. But sometimes it does feel like if you don't have trauma in the right way, like where people can actually pity you properly, because there's like Nesta and Tamlin who, because of their trauma, they're either like mean, because her method of coping is like just being mean and wasting money and like drinking, and Tamlin's was to be not a good person. Tamlin has tried to do the right thing, but he just keeps constantly getting like dogpiled on by like the characters. But Rhysand, like, he goes to Tamlin for some reason, and like, it's been said before that Rhysand's method of like trying to get people to kind of get out of their funk or their moods is to make them angry, or like to make them feel an opposite reaction. Like, he did that with Feyre. in like the first and second book. So it could be argued that this could be seen as Rhysand, because Tamlin is in a depression, like a terrible depression. He just wanders around in his beast form. He has like an animal version, like all the High Lords have an animal version of themselves. And so he's just like he has no like personhood, no humanity. He's a fairy, but you know what I mean. And so I guess it could be seen as Rhysand like coming to try and help him by like making him angry, but like no. Leave this man alone. Wait, I think he went twice though. I don't know if I remember. I think he might have confronted Tamlin twice. I don't remember. I wrote Rhysand went back a second time, and did he? I don't remember. I've heard justice for Tammy. Yeah, it's a little much. I don't know about like redemption arc. I don't even know. I don't really care enough for him to have a redemption arc. I just think like the way that his character was written and stuff, I think it was just a little unfair. I said before, nuance, like it could have just been handled a little better. Certainly him being in a depression and just like kind of letting his court like go to ruin is, you know, not necessarily like a bad storytelling device, but then like for people to continuously crap on him and be like he's such a terrible person. There's not much to say about Frost and Starlight. It's just a novella that you can read or not read. I don't know how like essential it is, but for fans, like really like big fans of the series, you know, I'm sure they've already read it. I don't need to like recommend it to anybody or not recommend it. Like if you're a fan of the series, you'll read it. I read it because I'm a very curious person, and that's part of why I read this series. That's why I'm listening to Crescent City. I can hear all different sides, like this is amazing, this is terrible, and I'm just interested. And I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, it is entertaining. But yeah, I just want to talk about that. I should have talked about that in the last video. I have not read that recently. Continuity. I need continuity. So I've talked about Ice Planet Barbarians already. I think I should do like just an entire video on that, so I won't talk about this single book, I guess, but I read the last book that I read, my last video, I read Barbarian Mind, and then I read Ice Planet Holiday, which is a novella. And then I read Barbarian's Prize, which was fun to read. It's a fun little read. And yeah, that was, I will say, Barbarian's Prize. I'm not sure, the main female character of Barbarian's Prize, she's black. And I don't know if she's the only black girl, but the whole time I'm reading, I'm just like, how is she doing her hair? I just know that if I was stranded on an alien planet with a bunch of ice people, and the thing is, the blue aliens, they all have, I guess it's described as like they have really coarse hair. I don't know, I guess they would have something, but nobody has like, you know, curly hair the way that she has curly hair, because she's a black girl. The author is white, and I mean, I like that Tiffany, the black girl, the main character, she's like the most attractive, cute. This is a nice little touch. I don't know. I think it's funny that she's like the most attractive and like the most sought after. And I think that's really interesting. If you want to look at it from like another lens, it's very interesting that, because the blue aliens, they don't have like a racial, you know, bias. And so they don't have like human beauty standards. They generally think that all the women, like the human women, are just weird looking in general, because obviously they're two different species. Just not having human beauty standards, and for like the black girl to be the most like coveted, is interesting, and I like it. I'm a little biased, obviously, because, you know, but yeah, I have to finish like the whole entire Ice Planet Barbarians series in order to do like a whole video on it, and I'm only on book number 6, and there's 23, so that's gonna take me some time. The next book I'm gonna talk about, I actually have the physical book, is The Heroes of Olympus, Rick Riordan, the son of Neptune. So it's the second book in the series. If you hear banging, I'm so sorry. My upstairs neighbors, they don't know how to be quiet. The thing about the Percy Jackson world, each book they have a quest typically that they have to go on, and these quests are usually given to them by people at the camp. Percy, Hazel, and Frank, they end up going on a mission to save Thanatos. He is the god that guards the doors to death. People, monsters, when they die, they're not dying, which is a problem, obviously. Percy, Hazel, and Frank, they go on a mission to save him. The young adult or middle grade type books can be very good and very enjoyable to read if they're well written, and Rick Riordan is a very good writer. But with that being said, I enjoyed the first book of this, and I knew that Percy wasn't in the first book of the Heroes of Olympus series. I don't know how much he's in the rest, but he's in this one. He's a central character. But the first one, I enjoyed that. I actually did enjoy that. It was very interesting. I don't have a problem with Jason. I've seen, some people find him boring. I don't have a problem with him, Piper, or Leo. I enjoyed that book. Kind of worried that I wouldn't enjoy it because Percy is a really good character in his point of view, because the Percy Jackson series is in his point of view. It's first person, and Percy's just like a cool character. He's a cool dude. But I was surprised that I did like it and found it enjoyable. But I was very happy to see my boy Percy again. I will say, so far, this is only the second book, but so far I liked this trio the best. As in terms of like individual characters, Frank and Hazel, I wasn't like super into them as characters, but as a trio, I thought they worked really well together. So far, the Heroes of Olympus, I feel like narratively it's not as strong as the Percy Jackson series. The Heroes of Olympus series gets the children of Roman demigods in the mix, and then Rick Riordan has other series focusing on I think Egyptian gods and Norse gods and stuff. Percy Jackson is solely on the Greek demigods, and then this one, like I said, gets Roman demigods in the mix. The kind of villain that we're dealing with in Percy Jackson series, the villain was Kronos. And then in the Heroes of Olympus series, we're dealing with Gaia. So a very formidable opponent that they're dealing with. And there was a prophecy that was given in the Percy Jackson series that talks about 7 heroes. So the first book in the series, we have 3 of the prophecy, and then this we have 3 more. And then the next book, Annabeth has not been she was in the first book of the series, and she was talked about in this and appeared a little bit, I think, but I think Annabeth is the other person of the prophecy. Juno is orchestrating the hero side. We have Gaia, who's on she's the big villain. She's the one that's stirring up all the drama, the issues. But on the hero side, we have Juno, who's got this master plan. I have 3 more books left in the series, and I'm taking a break. There's so many books I want to read, but I do want to know what happens. Each book has had their own kind of minor villains, and then the big bad. I've used that word a lot. I want to do a video talking about that trope, because I think I've been using it wrong. And the big bad in this series is Gaia. But basically, yeah, I'm enjoying this, and I still think the Percy Jackson series is stronger narratively, but it's still interesting. Rick Riordan is a good writer. Oh, I also just really like I feel like I say things and then I contradict myself a lot, but I mean what I say. It's just with caveats. I mean what I say, but with caveats. So last video I said that I'm not a big fan of urban fantasy, and I'll explain that later, but I'm generally not. But then there's things like this, where the Percy Jackson series is technically urban fantasy because it is set in a modern time, and you do have technology and stuff, but there's still enough of a fantasy element. I guess because urban fantasy is typically it takes place in a city, and these books, they take place in cities. They travel around mostly the United States, in the first series and then in this series so far. And then they go to some of these places where it just, I don't know, it doesn't feel gritty and edgy, I guess, which is that's my impression of urban fantasy. It's fun, and that's what I like. So the next one I want to talk about is, do I want to talk about this? Daisy Jones and the Six. I'll just say that I listened to it on Audible because a lot of people suggested to do that. My mom read this book, and she was not the biggest fan of it. And then I follow Cindy from With Cindy on Instagram, and she talked about that she read the book and also wasn't a big fan, and I trust her opinions and recommendations, So I actually read a book because of her recommendation and really liked it. And she said that she didn't like the book very much. People recommended that she listen to an Audible, and recently she talked about that it did kind of transform the story for her. Still just didn't keep me engaged. But I did watch the series. I actually watched it for my channel, but I've been enjoying the series, and I think that the way the book is written, it almost just feels like it wasn't written for the medium that it was written for. Like, it feels more like something that could be read aloud, acted out obviously in a TV show, but also like in a play or something. So yeah, I do feel like a lot of people really love this book, and it was really popular. So obviously it's also just up to personal taste, which is what a lot of things are up to. It's, this is all subjective. It wasn't my thing, but it's a lot of people's thing. It was popular enough to be made into a TV show. But basically, like Daisy Jones and the Six, it's kind of like, it's a sort of interview format talking about this fictional band from the 70s that's pretty much based on Fleetwood Mac. Generally what you would find, and sort of like a behind the music. I used to watch a lot of behind the music type things on like VH1 and MTV, and I just feel like I've heard the story before. For the audiobook, I enjoyed the author's note. I know it sounds weird, like that's at the very beginning of the book, but when I heard the author's note, it felt very immersive, and I was like, okay, I'm ready. The book proceeded to start off pretty strong for me. And then the switch in POVs, like listening to it, sometimes I don't know how it looks on paper, but sometimes it's a little jarring because like I got used to it, but I'd be listening and then somebody else would start talking and I was like, okay, so like we changed POVs, like, okay. But I wrote in my notes, like, I relate to Daisy because she wants connection. She's lonely, and part of her wanting to be like this famous rock star is because she wants that connection. She wants that attention, sort of. And I'm like, girl, I understand. I want to be an icon too. Yeah, so I like that the writer, she talks about some of like the inappropriate relationships that some of these band members would have with their groupies. It still happens now. Obviously, you have people in power taking advantage of just people below them, but also people who are younger. But I do feel like the 60s and 70s are kind of known for those inappropriate relationships. And moving on to House of Earth and Blood, Crescent City. But if you see the cover of the book, you would think that the book is called Crescent City. The series is called Crescent City. The book is called House of Earth and Blood. I'm gonna read the synopsis because I can't even explain. Like, if I wanted to try and give you an explanation, I couldn't do it. Like, just off the top of my head, couldn't do it. Sarah J. Maas has a new series. Like, her most recent one, I think this book came out in like 2020 or something. So House of Earth and Blood is the story of half fae and half human Bryce Quinlan as she seeks revenge in a contemporary fantasy world of magic, danger, and searing romance. Bryce Quinlan had the perfect life, working hard all day and partying all night until a demon murdered her closest friends, leaving her bereft, wounded, and alone. When the accused is behind bars, with the crimes start up again, Bryce finds herself at the heart of the investigation. She'll do whatever it takes to avenge their deaths. Hunt Athalar is a notorious fallen angel, now enslaved to the archangels he once attempted to overthrow. His brutal skills and incredible strength have been set on purpose to assassinate his boss's enemies. No questions asked. But with a demon wreaking havoc in the city, he's offered an irresistible deal. Help Bryce find the murderer, and his freedom will be within reach. So as Bryce and Hunt dig deep into Crescent City's underbelly, they discover a dark power that threatens everything and everyone they hold dear, and they find in each other a blazing passion, one that could set them both free if they'd only let it. Let me get my notes. So I will say, I'm listening to this on audiobook because, again, it's 800 pages. I don't know what it's like reading the book, but with the audiobook, sometimes I cannot tell whose POV it's in because I think it's dual POV, Bryce and Hunt's. I'm on the second book. I will say, it's entertaining, but it is sort of like being dropped in the middle of a book. You meet Bryce's best friend, and she's like she's like a shapeshifter, but she's like a werewolf sort of, and like they're not called werewolves, but they're like wolves. We start off with this relationship, and within like a few chapters they're gone, they're killed. Kind of supposed to have like this sympathy for, not kind of, you're supposed to feel bad for Bryce. All her friends died. You don't spend like a lot of time with them, so it doesn't really hit as much, not for me at least personally. And I saw a suggestion that should have happened, Danica and her friends being killed, that should have happened as like a prologue, and then the first chapter picks up the 2 years later, because you have like this all these events happening, and then Danica and the pack dies, and then it's 2 years later. But I agree, I think it would have worked if there was a prologue with Danica and the pack dying, and then you pick up 2 years later, get into the investigation and the mystery of it all. The world building in this is kind of confusing. Crescent City, like the world is just kind of like straight up confusing for me. It's just a lot. Oh, some of those characters, can't keep up with them. But at least that was like the first book. Ethan was mentioned, and I was listening to the audiobook, and I was walking my dog, and the narrator kept talking about, I forget whose point of view it was, maybe Bryce, and the narrator kept talking about Ethan, and I was like, who is Ethan? But now I know who Ethan is because I'm on the second book, and he's a pivotal like central character in the second book. I think there's a character now though. Somebody said Mark. I don't know who Mark is. The swearing. So this is an adult series. Alcatar was kind of promoted as young adult, and then it got repackaged as new adult. Honestly, I feel like Alcatar feels more adult than this series. A lot of swearing, and I am no prude. I feel like swearing is not the way to make something adult. Also, there's less sex in this. I think there's more in House of Sky and Breath, but there's like no smut in this. And Alcatar had like, I wouldn't say Alcatar had a ton of smut, but you know, I don't really know what's adult about this aside from like I guess there's like violence and then a lot of swearing. So Hunt and Bryce, they're like, I guess, a controversial couple in the Sarah J Maas like fan base. I did like them. I don't think that they had, what was the synopsis? The synopsis said they had a sizzling romance. I don't think that. I do feel like the dual POV kind of hurts their romance, because Bryce feeling certain things, thinking certain things about Hunt, it takes like that tension away, because she thinks that he's still in love with Shahar, which he is, but then from his point of view, he's like really feeling Bryce, you know? And so it kind of like takes that tension away, where you're like, are they gonna get together? Does he really like her? Is he still in love with this person? We immediately switch to his point of view, and it's like, yeah, I'm like really into Bryce. She's like really fucking hot. I did like the scene where she bathed him. Yeah, it was all in her point of view, I think, when she was bathing him, but then it switches to his point of view, and just like kind of like recapping what she did, and I just feel like it would have been better if it was just strictly from her point of view. Okay, chapter 79, there's a lot of action taking place towards the end of the book, and I don't know how it reads, but the narrator for the book, for the audiobook, did a really good job. I did feel the tension. I was doing my hair when I was listening to it, and I felt my heart beating a little bit. I will say that I found the end to be pretty good. I enjoyed the conclusion with Bryce saying goodbye to the pack. Despite my criticisms and stuff, I did think it was entertaining, and I enjoyed listening to it. I'm on Sky and Breath, and I'm less into this one, but with the whole thing about like the urban fantasy thing, what I was talking about, like sort of I'm just not super into urban fantasy in like this way. I'm just in general stories like this that take place in like a city, and like it's primarily in this like urban city. For example, Percy Jackson, like Percy's from New York, and like the final battle is in New York in the Percy Jackson series, but there's enough of like escaping like away from the city. It's enough of escapism for me. I guess because it's a completely like made up city though, it does feel like a escape still. Like it's just not my favorite thing, and it doesn't matter who writes it. I feel like it's just like not really my thing. I'm not a city girl. I've lived in suburbs my whole entire life, and I'm not even a suburbs girl. Like I want a piece of land all to myself where nobody can bother me. I just want to like live in the countryside and just run around in fields and plant things and find little rabbits in my garden. The last book that I'm going to talk about is The Hating Game, and I'm just going to preface by saying that it was enjoyable, and it's the kind of book that going into reading it, you definitely have to suspend disbelief. I did not talk about the Spanish love deception in my last video because, you know, if you don't like a book, it's okay to give criticism and stuff. Like, obviously that's fine, but I think it's good to also, you know, give like positive commentary, and I just wasn't really doing that. Me personally, I mean, I watch a lot of people that like read books and they're like, what was this? It was ridiculous. But for me, I don't want to do that. And if I really, really am not like vibing with something, I feel like I just won't talk about it. But people were saying that if you didn't like that book, then try The Hating Game. And The Hating Game actually came out way before The Spanish Love Deception. So very similar to The Spanish Love Deception, to the point that it's kind of like specific things that are just really, really similar. You know, the enemies to lovers thing, office romance, that's not anything new, but the girl is like really short in this and the guy is exactly 6'4", and in the Spanish Love Deception, the guy is exactly 6'4". There's a wedding in this too. It's very, very similar, but personally I think that this one is better. Let me read the synopsis first. Lucy Hutton, why am I saying it like that? Lucy Hutton. How should I say that? It's Hutton. The way I want to say it is Hutton, but I think it's Hutton, but that doesn't feel natural coming out of my mouth. Lucy Hutton has always been certain that the nice girl can get the corner office. She's charming and accommodating and prides herself on being loved by everyone at Bexley and Gammon. Everyone except for coldly efficient, impeccably attired, physically intimidating Joshua Templeman. And the feeling is mutual. Trapped in a shared office together, 50 or 60 hours a week, they've become entrenched in an addictive, ridiculous, never-ending game of one-upmanship. There's the staring game, the mirror game, the HR game. Lucy can't let Joshua beat her at anything, especially when a huge new promotion goes up for the taking. If Lucy wins this game, she'll be Joshua's boss. If she loses, she'll resign. So why is she suddenly having steamy dreams about Joshua? After a perfectly innocent elevator ride ends with an earth-shattering kiss, Lucy starts to wonder whether she's got Joshua Templeman all wrong. Maybe Lucy Hutton doesn't hate Joshua Templeman, and maybe he doesn't hate her either. Maybe this is just another game. Yeah, so the two main characters, the only people that we spend like real time with, they work at a publishing company. It was a merger, like Bexley and Gammon. They were two separate companies and they merged together. So Bexley is the company that Josh works for and executive, like they wear suits and stuff. And Gammon is the company that Lucy works for, works for, and poetry and cardigans and, you know, all that stuff. So there was a merger, and the Bexley side and the Gammon side, they don't really mingle well. And so, but because of that difference, that kind of like created the sort of tension that Lucy and Josh have. Polar opposites. He's really straight-laced, and not even straight-laced. He's like really rigid and kind of harsh. Lucy is like, she collects Smurfs, which is fine. I mean, like, if you collect Smurfs in real life, that's fine. To have that hobby for the main character, it's so, like, very specific. But, you know, you do you, girl. Get your Smurfs. And, you know, Lucy's, like, quirky and whatever. I would love the opposite to happen. If there's a book, somebody might have written one like this, but I wish there was an opposite. The guy was, like, artsy and quirky, and then the girl was, like straight-laced, and that would be interesting. Maybe I should write it. And then if I do, if nobody's gotten to this yet, this is my idea first. So the whole enemies to lovers thing was already better in this than the Spanish Love Deception, just because they did have some tension and they argued and had these like little games that they played with each other. But the Spanish Love Deception female character, she was just like, I hate him, he's the devil, he's evil. And then Aaron, the main male love interest, he was just like, hi, I'm here. And he was just there, and she was just like, her inner monologue was constantly like, I hate him, he's terrible, he's blah. But still, like, even so obvious that Josh was into Lucy. And not only that, but, well, not only that. Josh, he's like mean to Lucy to kind of just like mess with her like a elementary school kid. Josh as a character, like I said, you have to suspend disbelief for sure. One of the many games that they play, which by the way, I think I wrote a note about this and I felt so stupid when I finally realized what was happening. I didn't make a connection with the title until they have like the staring game, the HR game, and it didn't occur to me until page 91 when Lucy says the hating game, the title of the book, and I was like, oh. So they play these little games, the HR game, and the HR game is like they're constantly reporting each other to the HR. The amount of times that they do that, obviously in real life they'd be forced to like do some counseling or something, or maybe receive disciplinary action. I don't really know, because obviously there's just a lot of things that happen that just wouldn't happen in real life. But there's still things that Josh does. There's just things that he does that I'm just like, I don't like it sometimes. Oh yeah, Lucy's family has like a strawberry farm. And for some reason she's like embarrassed about that. I don't really know why. And to be honest, the whole thing with her parents, like she talks about how she misses them, but she doesn't want to go home. Like, she's homesick, but she doesn't want to go home. I'm like, girl, if you don't take your ass home. I thought that they would go, like, her and Josh, I thought they would go to the strawberry farm, and they never do. She talks about it so much. I thought they were going to go. And then she also talks about her friend, like, an ex-friend, an ex-best friend, and I thought that we were going to get, like some resolution with her. We never do. Almost every scene is probably them together. A strong focus on the relationship. I was really enjoying it. Towards the end, I started to kind of find it harder to get through. And the end is like really rushed. But I liked when they got to the wedding and the climax of it. I liked the climax. And I don't hate Josh. I don't think he's like a terrible character. Some of his traits are interesting, and yeah, obviously he's not a real person. If he were a real person, going the other way. I'm walking the other way. There is some snappy dialogue in this. There's some good jokes that made me laugh. A writer that I think is excellent at snappy dialogue though is Emily Henry. Her dialogue is great. Her jokes are great. And it almost reminds me of like Gilmore Girls, like the way that, oops, I dropped my book. Like how quick it is. I laughed during this when I was reading the Spanish Love Deception. I wasn't laughing. I was laughing at my own jokes, honestly. I wrote notes. I have the ebook, and so I made some notes. I was laughing at my own jokes to myself. The female character, she's short. She's like 5 feet tall, and Josh is like 6'4", so it's a really big height difference. Which is fine, and it's okay to be like a small person, it's okay to be a tall person, it's okay to have a height difference. Short people deserve rights, but there's so much focus on her being tiny and him being like this big, strong, masculine man. There's just like a lot of focus on like Josh being really big and tall, and like because he's big and tall, he's so masculine. But not only that, but Lucy compares him to people that she's dated in the past. People who were like 5'6" and stuff. I'm like, girl, you're 5 feet tall. A 6-inch height difference is still a significant height difference. Like if you take somebody who's 6 feet tall versus somebody who's like 6'6", that's a major height difference. Yeah, Josh like taking care of Lucy while she was sick though. That was sweet. It is funny though that he's just in her apartment. Again, you have to suspend disbelief because there's like a strange man. I mean, she's known him for like a year. I think they've been working together for like a year. So he's not a stranger. But, you know, they've never really hung out like that outside of work. So, you know, in real life, I'd be like, can you get out of my apartment, please? But it is sweet that the way he takes care of her. Oh. There's this thing. So Josh is not a nice person. I mean, he's a nice person. Deep down, but on the surface he presents as not very nice. He's shy, which comes around later in the book that people didn't really realize that he was shy. Like even his own brother for some reason didn't know that he was shy. So yeah, he just kind of like presents as not a nice person. And so he has this kind of, he has dated people in the past who have said that his personality is not the greatest, and he has like insecurities about that. But he has this gripe where he brings it up a lot, where he talks about like the nice guy, and especially regarding Lucy and like this other guy that she sees like very, very briefly, and he just like makes these comments like, yeah, like you prefer the nice guy, girls are always on the market for a nice guy. Like, where else does he say it? Goddamn, I'm just gonna be flipping through this whole fucking book. Just basically like his gripe with like the nice guy, and how he's not perceived as like the nice guy, and how like Lucy seems like she wants a nice guy. Like, she even at some points, like, she'll mention wanting to date a nice guy, like just her criteria, and Josh gets like weird about that. And it's like, you know, you don't have to be a jerk, be a nice person. Not hard. I am a shy person, and obviously being introverted and shy and stuff and socially awkward and all that, like, it can come off differently. As a shy person, you know, you can come across as kind of maybe cold or reserved, but it's still like not an excuse to like just be rude. Josh is just kind of like rude. Oh, there's some minor things about like people's bodies and stuff that were just strange. Oh, 257. 257, Josh and Lucy are getting steamy with each other, and Josh picks Lucy up, and she's like, my last boyfriend, the last man I had sex with forever ago, this is her inner monologue, was only about 5'6". He could never have picked me up. He'd have ruptured a disc in his fragile, boy-sized spine. I literally read that and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? So, it's just like stuff like that. Anyway, it gave me what I wanted from the Spanish Love Deception, and that's all I asked for. People were saying to read this if you read the Spanish Love Deception and got a little disappointed, and, you know, this was what I was looking for. I would like to read like a true enemies to lovers. I feel like this still wasn't like a true enemies to lovers, because they would argue and stuff, but it wasn't like they didn't really hate each other, because Josh loved her the entire time, and it took Lucy a while to get there. So yeah, like, I want people who hate each other. Like, I want two people who want the other to like die. Like, that's how much they hate each other and they fall in love. That's what I want. I was curious about watching the movie until I saw the guy who they casted for Joshua, and he's just not who I pictured. And like I said, I didn't hate Josh. He just has like some interesting characteristics. He at least had a personality, his own motivations, and like he felt like a real person. Like, I feel like sometimes the main male love interest sometimes doesn't feel like a person. But for a debut novel, it's pretty well written. This came out in 2016, I think. So my congratulations are late. Congrats for publishing a pretty decent first book. Congrats for being published, period. I wish I was published. I would actually have to finish what I'm writing. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. That's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and goodbye.
I'm falling to pieces in my room.